Hi there, it's Ron and Cyndi Gula with another episode of the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show. How are you doing, Cyndi?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ron?
I am quite well.
I'm very excited for this interview. This is going to be fun.
So today, our guest is a screenwriter for a number of very famous movies, Jon Hoeber. Jon, how are you doing?
Hey, I am fantastic and super excited to be here.
We are very thrilled. Anybody who watches the show knows that we always talk about data care and we always talk about getting more people, including minorities, into cybersecurity. And I've always joked I want to get like a Top Gun of cybersecurity made. So we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about pitching movies. We're gonna talk about your experiences, in the industry. So let's get to it. You want to talk about some of the movies he's done?
Well, I can see some of them behind his head. So, I mean, Red is one of our favorites. So that is
mine as well. That was a real kickoff for my brother and I, and he and I write, I should say, on as a team on almost everything that we do, and so all of the big ones for sure. But that was one that is still all these years later very near and dear to our hearts. We had a ton of fun making it.
Well, and my guilty pleasure is the one that's right behind your head too, the Meg. So, I mean, that was so much fun just to watch, and I just enjoyed the heck out of it.
Well, and we're super excited because I think yesterday we handed in the what ought to be the final production kickoff rewrite for Meg 2. So
wow.
Yes.
Theater near you. We're hoping to shoot it in London at the beginning.
Can you spoil anything? Is there a giant octopus? Is there a cool nuclear submarine in it? Like what's going to happen?
Perhaps
does Godzilla show up?
I like how you're going straight for all my best material.
Okay.
No, there's no nuclear subs, but you definitely are in the realm of some other. There will be more monsters, bigger adventures, lots to see coming out of the trench.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Phenomenal.
But that we haven't even touched on probably one of your most famous or iconic movies.
Which is I gotta look down here. Battleship? No. Which one? What are we going for?
Come on, you know what one? Transformers.
Well, you're working on Transformers, right?
Yes. So Transformers, it'll be 7. Rise of the Beast is shooting right now. And shooting around the world. They're huge movies, and I am one of quite a number of people who have contributed to the writing of that movie. It was really fun. My brother and I came on just before shooting, and to help the director, who is Stephen Capel Jr., who's just a fantastic guy, super smart, super talented, sort of hone his vision getting into production. And these movies, Transformer movies, franchise, they're so big, and there's so many moving parts to really any of these huge effects movies. But I think that one is perhaps in its own level of size and scope and insanity of how hard they are to produce.
So when you're writing that, do you literally write about 9,000 polygons fall off of Optimus Prime as he strikes, No,
but I do think about the one guy or gal who gets to spend 7 months working on that single, 16-second shot, and building it out digitally. I love one of my favorite things about being a screenwriter is how many different things you can work on, and getting to move. Each project is different. Each group of people is different. So anytime I'm meeting people whose jobs are incredibly long and focused on this just single tiny bits of detail, these incredible artists, I'm always amazed, and my chest gets a little tight when I sit about thinking about it.
So could you spend a little bit of time, talk about your origin story, your first movie? And I know you've done some interviews on this, but also talk for a bit about working with your brother. We're a husband and wife team, and we also work together. It's not a common thing to work with a parent, work with a sibling, work with a spouse. So please tell us how you kind of got here.
Yeah, and there actually are a few sibling teams in Hollywood, that are famous. The Hughes brothers, the Wachowskis. There's a number of them, but it is definitely not the most common. Going back to the beginning, yes. So it's kind of funny because I always loved movies, and growing up in South Sacramento, it never occurred to me that people made them. Just happy to wave my, back then, whatever, $6, $8 in the air on Friday night and go see whatever was coming at the Century Theaters out at Arden Fair. But just had no vision for it. So when I went to college, I went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut with the intention of pursuing medicine. And it so happens they have an incredible film program there, of which I was completely unaware. Ironically, full circle, Michael Bay, who directed the first 5 Transformers movies and created them, went there as well. So small worlds. But as have just innumerable other creators. Lin-Manuel Miranda is super famous these days, but tons of writers, tons of screenwriters. For what is a very small program, they turn out a disproportionate amount of stuff. So once I realized, oh my gosh, in college, I could get credit for watching movies. I thought this was going to be super simple and easy. And I was super excited to take a class. And I just caught the bug. From that point on, it was just, I was just down the rabbit hole. And after graduating as a film major, I had to move to Los Angeles to take my shots. And it was interesting because at that time, in the early mid 90s, there was a spec market, a spec script, the speculative, you're writing it and then hoping to sell it, was very hot. And young new talent were getting 6-figure deals for penning action movies, and I was super excited because I knew the streets were paved with gold. And then it proceeded to absolutely happen in a completely different way for me. So none of the flashy kickoff. But so I moved to Los Angeles at right after college, 22, start writing as one has to do. And that was, by the way, one of the other things that I found truly exciting about the idea of being a writer. A little less, it's hard to be a writer, but one of the big concepts of it was that with no connections and nothing but you have everything you need to be successful. It's a bootstrap business, right? Because I was completely unconnected, other than having gone to this college, which is great, but they're not handing out, screenwriter jobs at the end of it. So my brother at the time, he had studied conducting and composition. He's a music guy, but we're both in Los Angeles. We're both starving. We were, and at a certain point, I was like, "Hey, man, you want to collaborate on a movie?" And we kick it off. And we wrote several, all of which had sparks of an idea, but none of them were great. None of them were sold or grabbing us an agent. But by sort of number 4, we were like, well, we'd been spending all of our time earning money crewing on film. So after 4 years in, I start out, of course, as a PA, but I was an electric, worked on camera teams at second ACs, which are often the guys who load film and pull focus, which is an incredibly stressful job. As a sidebar, some people have the dreams about being naked in high school, having to speak in front of people. To this day, all these years later, I wake up at night in sweats about a tracking shot into a mirror focused on something in the back of the room, and I'm trying to hit all my cues. It's so weird. But anyway, we had these tech backgrounds, and we were like, well, let's make a film. And we were all kind of, young and ballsy enough to not know that wasn't maybe the best idea or that it would work. So we put together, my brother and I, my wife, Jennifer Leitzis, who I actually met in the film program at Wesleyan, to direct, and then another friend of ours, Sean Cooley. And we wrote this movie, and then stumbled into financing and got it made in the most magical way as this little independent movie shot in Manhattan for $3.5 million, starring Stanley Tucci and Keira Sedgwick. John Ritter was in it, Phil Seymour Hoffman. It was all these things incredible came together. We got into Sundance, opened Sundance in 1998. We're at the top of the world, thought it was all ready to go, and then proceeded to basically starve to death for the next 10 years, unable to sort of turn that into studio rewriting and writing and adapting. And there's a lot of different things about that I think are sort of interesting. You know, just because you're good or very good as a writer in one arena doesn't mean you're going to be trusted with $100 million movies or the movie stars and problems that come along with those $100+ million price tags. But what was amazing about it, looking back, was we did earn our money doing nothing but writing for those 10 years. And we were going up for studio projects, you know, rewrites, adaptations, and we had agents. And so basically we would get an assignment or have an idea, design a pitch it, and then most of the time not sell it. But for that decade, and we were pitching once a month, so at least. So designing, you know, hundreds and thousands of hours of doing that. So later, once Battleship started taking off, once Red started taking off, they came out at different times, but we were actually shooting contemporaneously. Once we were sort of in the room, in the realm, and had our at bat, and we're getting pitched at in the majors, we really had the skills to be able to do it quickly, do it well, in a way that I wouldn't have had I not had that, you know, 10 years of wandering in the desert.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I do wish my 15-year overnight success had been more like a 5-year overnight success, but you know, you get what you get, and that's something that I think is important for people who are out there trying to do this. To remember is it takes time. It takes time to develop your craft. You know, media always makes it look like you either have the magic spark or you don't. And, you know, you sit down and you have that brilliant montage and you write the work you were always meant to be. But it's a skill like anything else, and it takes time to develop.
Yeah, in our industry, it's very similar. You know, the foundation that you bring into a company or the diversity of activity that you've learned through, you know, other jobs and other work. I think there's a lot of people that are surprised at how much of that pulls through.
Yeah, the idea you had of, hey, let's start a movie, that's a big chance that you had to take, but you had all this experience leading up to that. And that's what we look for in a lot of our first-time entrepreneurs. Do they have some sense of they know what they're doing? Because the entrepreneurs who come to us are like, hey, just tell me what I should do.
Right.
You know, we can do that, but that's not that. You know, we want the passion and somebody have an idea of where they're going. So
Well,
that's
I think
phenomenal.
I think it's well said, because, you know, when people are looking at up and coming writers now, it's really sort of the same thing as what you're saying. Even if on your first screenplay that's not selling, what agents look for when they're evaluating is voice. Like, do you have a unique voice? You know, this might not have been the story that we can sell to the market, but are you an interesting writer? And so much of that is where you come from, how you tell a story, how you talk. And so I think it's a really important piece of the conversation that's being had more and more in other industries these days.
Well, let's talk about pitching concepts and ideas, because we live in a society where we talk more than we listen. And I always try to coach people that if you're going to talk, you might have to do it in a tweet, you might do it in email, you might do it in an elevator pitch. And I actually messed this up the other day. We had a meeting with somebody and I thought we was going to have 30 minutes. The person showed up late. We had 10 minutes. And I personally wasn't prepared to, like, what are the things I got to deliver? So how do you pitch? What do the pitches look like? What kind of advice can you give to people?
Right. So pitches, it's interesting because I want to break this down 3 ways, because there's pitches, there's treatments, and there's screenplays. Of course, none of which are movies. And each one of these things is its own complete world. And of course they are related, but the skill sets to develop them and what they are and the tools that what they're trying to achieve are all uniquely different. So, and it's really hard to get your head around that, because those 4 things will exist on the same project, but they look very different. So pitches for me, I used to hate doing it because I was terrible at it, and I found it very stressful. At this point, my brother and I hone them to what is essentially a word-by-word memorized document that we can absolutely perform consistently moment to moment each time. So if we pitch 6 people, we will give virtually the same performance. And the strength of that is it takes away the nervousness because you know exactly what you're doing. It takes away any of the problems of responding to somebody across from you who is, you know, the energy is different, the room is different, the schedule is different, and lets us be absolutely consistent. So when one person goes, wow, we're buying it, and the other person goes, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, it becomes about them and their market and takes the stress of engagement and performance. Now, the challenge of that is it takes a lot of time to prep our pitches. We don't walk in there and be like, oh, it's, you know, we're feeling this today. But we do it because we're a team, and you can never be totally sure what the other guy's doing unless you sort of mark out each other's territory. And because we think it's really worth honing the performance to hook people on the details so they feel like they're watching a movie or being taken through it as we do it. And I sort of think the more incredibly honest to that feeling we can get, the more connection and success we have in communicating what it is we're trying to make the movie be. And thus, for the right person, it'll be a successful engagement.
And what are the 3 things? You said it's a script, a treatment, and a screenplay?
Correct.
What are those?
Great. So next, and when I write one of these pitches, the pitch performance is probably 15 minutes long. It's about 6-7 pages. You know, you're not covering everything, but it's super important that you're covering your character, where the movie fits in the marketplace. You know, it's not, hey, this is a $200 million movie and it's going to make you $1 billion. It's this is a movie for everyone. This is a movie that everyone can see, or maybe it's not. Maybe this is a movie for kids, but here's how we're going to loop in their parents as well. Or, you know, so knowing the demographic. And by the way, I also have to give the caveat that this is all in the realm of sort of popular films. You know, you can, if you're doing your indie thing, man, it's none of these rules apply to you whatsoever. But you do need to know how to talk about your story in a compelling way. So the pitch is sort of capturing that energy and that feeling and knowing the characters along the way, feeling their problem, really grabbing that tone of the movie, and then boom, what is the surprise and the fun of the ending. So you've got that. And it's nice that at this point, people I'm pitching to generally know who we are or the types of things we do. So that's working in our favor. Treatments then are the outline of the movie. And it's basically a scene by scene, maybe 15 pages, single spaced, listing every character, everything that happens, every motivation, where you are emotionally in it, how the action works, not writing the action out, but just, you know, big scene, little scene, car chase, this, where you're at the end of every scene so you know how to launch into it. And at its best, you can start to really feel the flow of the movie. Where is it too slow? Are all the characters tracking? Have we lost somebody? And the genius of a good treatment to me is that it gives you freedom when you're writing the script. When you're writing the script, then you're not sitting there going, oh my God, I forgot I have to get this guy back in here, or what scene should come next? It's to be able to say, okay, how incredible can I shape this action sequence or make this character dynamic? It's the only thing I'm worried about, is making that dialogue pop or this twist or something unexpected coming out of these characters, because I'm so well bounded by everything else. I have to do one thing, not 50 things, and be worrying about, like, am I actually headed in the right direction? Plus, if you have a good treatment off of a pitch or off of an adaptation, whatever you're doing, it really gets everybody who is buying the movie, producing the movie, on the same page. And that becomes an incredibly important thing. And we've gone horribly wrong on this in our career. So it took us a while to get to this point, because if you sell something in a pitch and then you walk away for 3 months, maybe 4, in their heads, they're kind of writing the movie. they're remembering the best parts and they're filling in stuff that you never said. And it can get to the point then where you hand over that script and they feel like it's not what they were thinking of. And a good treatment completely takes that problem off the table, which is really fun. If you, at this point in our careers, we develop these things, and if you like that treatment, if we agree on everything in it, and we have no problem going back and forth, to develop it with them. We want the notes, we want to hear the problems, we want to get it so everybody feels great about it. And once we get to that point, it's incredibly difficult for them not to like the movie because we've already felt the tone. And from a creative process, this is really fun because sometimes people go, how do you just sit? I could never have sat down and just written that. My response is always, I could never have just sat down and written that. But I sat there with my brother in a Nerf football. Nerf football, greatest writing tool ever invented. And you just throw it back and forth. And you are with it, like your buddies, your college friends, a cocktail party. You're like, oh, you know what would be a good movie? And it starts with a single line or a character or a thought or an article. Start there. And then you're like, well, what are the 4 things that could happen? And you sort of build it out just a little bit to a 1 page. And then you're like, oh, okay, we can do a pitch out of this. And then from the pitch, you get a treatment, from treatment, a script. And it's this constant additive process that makes nothing feel too intimidating. It's not just sitting down and going, oh my God, okay, I have to write Hansel and Gretel from the witch's point of view, and it's going to be a horror thriller. Where do I start? But I'm typing. That's
yeah,
like the most creatively horrifying thing I can imagine.
Yeah, I'm glad you went like the innovation and draft and how these come up, because in my mind, I imagine you walking down the street and like, I am walking down the street and I'm looking to the left and then I'm looking to the right and I see the flower shop. I mean, it just seems in my head that, that's how I would perceive somebody who writes for a living, is they're constantly writing what they're seeing. But, it does make more sense and hopefully more fun with a Nerf football.
Well, I like your version. I think my version growing up of that was maybe why writing also attracted me is I'm always the guy who a day later says, oh, you know what I should have said? Whatever snappy comeback in the situation that I'm always a beat behind it. So
when you're doing these pitches, how often are you trying to basically sell the business where, hey, if you make this movie, you're going to make $200 million or you're going to get 12 Academy Awards? Like, how often does the business come into this?
It's interesting. It is incredibly integrated, but not really talked about that in that way. So one of the things we do is when we're thinking up a movie or an adaptation, we do a lot of those. You want to think about what the audience is and what sort of the type of movie. And I'd encourage people who are writing to think of a template, right? If you're thinking of a movie and you can't name another movie like it, you're probably in the wrong direction. So you have to make sure then that things are going to fit together. If it's a little gritty thriller, it probably shouldn't have $100 million of effects. If it's going to cost $200 million, it better be for all, they call it 4 quadrants, all the audiences. And so, having a basic lineup of what you're selling versus what could be in the marketplace is a good starting space. The other thing is we have these beautiful magical creatures called agents who go out there and are always talking to people in studios and in constant communication and to figure out what they are looking for to help us then target what we're selling. And that's really one of the most important things agents do, is really help you get in front of the right people. And in some ways, this is my quick agent rant, which is not on topic, but people have funny funny ideas about agents and what they do. And really their sole job is to put you in front of the person who you need to be in front of, the best person to get your thing. People are like, sometimes talk about their agents not reading their stuff. I was like, what? Your agent needs to read it enough to know how to sell it, but it's not their responsibility to write your movie, nor are they so magical that they can just have your movie sold because they're a super agent. All they can do is put you in front of the person who can say yes. And when they do that well, your career just takes off. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that was interesting because that's it probably as a catch-22 when you say my movie is Pirates of the Caribbean, but in space, but at the same time, you don't want to be pigeonholed into something that it's not without having the ability to let it grow into what you kind of expect it to be.
Right.
I mean, how do you deal with that?
It's a great question, and once again, it's kind of helpful because on the agent front again is they'll lead into it. The guys, they have a new idea. Oh yeah, what is it? It's Pirates of the Caribbean in space, but better. Their twist on it. It's going to be great.
With time travel.
Exactly, because time travel is just always works and is easy to write. So what's great then is when we're actually in front of them, they're primed as to what it's gonna be without us having to be super reductive about it. So then we can really concentrate on our fun storytelling as we pitch and go through that. So it is a balance of conversation.
Have you ever had that, hey, you're trying to sell Pirates of the Caribbean in space and you start with, so the nuns come to the, out and blah, blah, blah. And you just have a complete mismatch of understanding.
Yeah, it is interesting. There every once in a while you walk into a room and you do wonder if the exec has been briefed whatsoever. And then there are times when you just are, it's like stand-up comedy gone wrong. You were just absolutely not connecting. The room is dead. You could see everybody's suffering. You're suffering. You still have to, they're being polite. You have to finish. And it's just a terrible experience for everyone.
I think you've experienced that, right? When you go into some place and start describing cybersecurity.
Oh completely, my gosh, yeah. It'll go over the top.
Yeah.
I'm still a little not taken aback, but the fact that you rehearsed the pitch with your brother, we get, I mean, just this week we probably had about 4 pitches. I can tell when the person trying to, our pitches are, hey, we want you to invest in our company can help defend the country. It's usually something like that.
Cyndi, I can defend the country.
There you go. There you go. But I just the concept of rehearsing, I think, is really an interesting thing. Does it hold true? Like if you're pitching Sony and Amazon and Netflix, or you're pitching a TV series or a movie, are you still going to rehearse that pitch and try to have that consistent kind of view?
You mean in between the pitches or in between projects?
In between the pitches.
We'll get it up and we write it all the way out. We start saying it out loud. That creates a lot of edits. You realize you can always trim back more. You find things in the performance, and we go through it a lot. And then once it's really up and running, and by the way, just to be clear, the final, when we are pitching, the goal is to make it sound like it's not rehearsed, like it's all super easy and off the cuff, and like a good actor would. So they're not, when I say rehearsed, they're not rehearsed down to the bone to be dry. It feels like a very free flowing thing. Like, oh my God, Eric just interrupted and said this, and I got that, but it's that well meshed. So once we get it up and running like that, if these pitches are sort of on consecutive days, no, we don't necessarily. Then it's up and running. We have the performance. I tend to get super nervous before them, even with it all running, which is sort of why we have this structure. So I'll often redo the first page, like I'll be sitting in the lobby, like right beforehand. Though I have to say, Zoom, which I thought was going to make pitches awful, made pitches incredible because you can, I'll just take, for example, a piece of paper here. You can hold it just behind your eye line. Reading is exactly at the camera, so you look like you're talking, and it's no problem whatsoever. And it's become, for people who have difficulty pitching, it's the best secret in the world.
Do you get pitched, like, do you go to get coffee and here's your menu and it's a script, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's really it of course happens. Where it really happens the most is my family, my parents, and even worse, my wife's parents, who are, you know, super proud of us, and you know, then at parties, at socials, at whatever, it always has somebody's nephew or niece or cousin writing or whatever, and I told them you'd read it. I'm like, you know, 2 hours of my time. So
we've been there. We've been there. Yeah. I have a son who wants to learn about cybersecurity. It's like, yes, every day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so how do you filter that?
We usually try to answer the questions as quickly as possible, and you know, because we're trying to encourage that kind of stuff. But it's same thing. Hey, my son's got a company. Can you meet with him? That's a bit tougher, you know. And it's like, well, what do they do? It's interesting. We want to be nice. We want to help people, right?
Right, and that's one of the reasons that you have the 5-slide pitch deck, where we do try to tell people how to boil down their pitch to at least include these 5 things so that you can get through something quickly. So not exactly rehearsed, but definitely defined.
We had a week of I'll say frustrating opportunities where 90% of the pitches we were getting were things that they had done before and why they were successful then. So of course I'll be successful now. Like, I don't care if you've been on CNN or Fox, or you hacked for the CIA or anybody else, right? What problem are you solving now? How are you solving it? All the way of what does success look like? And a lot of times these people don't really know that, which is fun. Yeah. So do you have any, like, we can't pitch that, like Hollywood's not going to let us pitch that, or we can't have a character like that, or, you know, do you have any of that kind of restrictions when you're drafting things?
Oh, it's interesting. You know, really only within the bounds of genre and it being a commercial operation. You know, if you're making Harry Potter, you want to go dark, but you can only go so dark. You know, if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny. You know, you can't shoot the dog unless that's what the movie's about. Love John Wick. You know, I had an exec at Warner Brothers say, "Wait, in that explosion were kids killed? Because we don't do dead kids at Warner Brothers." Fair enough. So really, no. I mean, there aren't really creative limits, but it's of good taste and of the type of movie you're telling.
That's
which
awesome.
Is why I love writing. You know, writing all different kinds of movies. We have they're casting right now a one that we wrote. Lionsgate has it, a Burning Man comedy. The whole thing's set at Burning Man.
Oh my gosh.
50-year-old man, 16-year-old daughter runs off to Burning Man after lying to him, and he goes there to save her. And of course, he's the one who needs to go on the journey, not her. She's fine. But you know, so that's a really, you know, ripping, raunchy, R-rated comedy. And then you have things like My Spy that are, you know, cute family drama, and we have, you know, harder action stuff. And I'm just finishing up a like super stripped down ripping action, like John Wick style, minimalistic, kick-ass movie that I'm really excited about. So it's fun being able to have these things, and just because you can't put them all in one movie, I'm like, I'll save it. We'll think of a great character, doesn't fit, we save it. We'll put it in another movie sometime later.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah. According to IMDb, you're working on Mighty Mouse, Meg 2, Naruto, and something called Fast and Loose with Will Smith. Is that accurate, more or less?
That is accurate. They're all in different stages. The Will Smith thing is super exciting. It's with David Leitch directing, and is Company 87 North producing, and Will Smith, of course, producing. And what was great was it was a movie that we've already written, and it had been sitting on the shelf at a studio who had sort of changed the sort of size of the movies that they were making, but it was found, and all of a sudden all these people got attached to it. So that's like the greatest thing that could ever happen to a screenwriter, in terms of you've already done all the work, and now it's going to be a Will Smith movie, and with the most amazing directing, producing team on it. So absolutely fantastic. So that was exciting.
How about Mighty Mouse?
Mighty So Mighty Mouse is a good classic example of how things go sideways. We wrote, developed a draft with the producers and studio, the sort of department head, and was really one of the most exciting things I've been on in a long time. And we were more proud of it than anything we'd done in a long time. And then when it went to the highest levels of green light, and we thought we were just on rails for it getting to be made, it was decided by marketing that the mouse's journey, what his day job was, and where he was going to end up, was not for them. So we're immediately off the movie, and they bring in another team to start from scratch. So this happens, more often than not. The fact that Eric and I were the writers on Red from pitch through production and nobody else. Same with Red 2. My Spy. It's very unusual, as opposed to there being lots of other things. And like, for instance, The Meg, we were the Fix-It guys. They, which is another interesting part of the business, they had replaced the creative team, brought in a new director, and they had a start date locked down because of the actor Jason Statham's window. And so they had been building already. They had already started construction. We're building down in New Zealand, and the director doesn't want to shoot what the old script is. So they bring us in, and it's a super high pressure situation because they're spending money every day building sets that may or may not be used. They've sort of a drop dead day of, we're going to either have to pay or play Jason Statham, a deal where you're guaranteed that he gets paid whether or not he makes the movie, and can we make that window? So we came in, what we originally understood the job to be when we went up for it was 2 weeks of dialogue polish, which is fun. You get paid a lot. You don't have to like stressfully move around parts of the movie. Just hone the characters. You get to be funny, haha. But we get in there with the director, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm not shooting that script. Let's figure it out." And so we did, and we only had, because of the time constraints, 20 days to write the first draft of the movie, to figure out, to let the studio be in a position where they could say, yes, we're moving forward with this, or no, we're not. And it luckily became a yes, and then we were on the movie for another 6 months. And so that's the example where I'm the other guy who came in and replaced the original sort of creative vision. So there's sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the fly. So it is in Hollywood. You try not to get upset about it, but of course you do.
So how much would we have to pay you as you're rewriting these scripts to insert cybersecurity, like scenes, just random? Oh, I got to change my password. Yeah, something like that. Like, why don't we see more cybersecurity in movies? Why do you think that?
I like that. And by the way, I think one of the great things about the podcast you do and all of your outreach is that you, as a result of it, will start to see a bunch of that stuff. I mean, I think for a lot of writers, it's just education and awareness. You've seen other things sort of trickle through generations of Hollywood in terms of minority characters, in terms of different religious beliefs, in terms of locations where you're even shooting. And that's before you get into product placement, which is sometimes done very well and sometimes done very poorly. At its best, it ought to be this, amazing sort of organic thing that is the right tool. And of course it is. And by way of example, when I write action movies that are character based, I name very specifically the weapons that these guys are using and cars that they're using, because to me, that's a very natural extension of character. And if I don't do it, some prop master is just going to, be assigning guns. So like in Red, Bruce Willis character, he's old school. He has a 1911, Service 45. That's him. And it wouldn't be the same at the end of it if they weren't. And, of course, and then it trickles down to all the other characters. So I think in cybersecurity and having that be a background thing, I think a lot of it is just educating the people out there who are writing and producing and directing this stuff. And I think, as you stay at it, you will see more. I know just in our interactions, I'm significantly more aware of it. And yeah, let's type in that password. Let's check some of the phone stuff. One of the challenges, of course, though, is there is a constant pressure of time in these storytelling. And all sorts of things are constantly being reduced. And in some place it's cutting, in some place it's making them less real. So, somebody's going to travel from Los Angeles to New York. You don't have to see them get in the cab and drive to the airport.
Or in the Godzilla movie, you see them getting into some underground tube and just show up like pneumatically, supersonically.
Yes, it does go too far as often as not, where you're like, where it's clear production problems and cutting, and we didn't do our jobs well. I think that's part of the problem is trying to move forward through story. And I think part of the problem is that challenge of how do we visualize cybersecurity? And I think it's interesting because I'm sure you have plenty of versions where, well, in fact, let me ask you, what is your best thing you've seen, and what's just some terrible stuff that you've seen on screen?
Wow. I mean, so when we were thinking about this, we had this question a lot. So, one of the ones is just when you name drop all this stuff, and the classic scene is in Mission Impossible, right? So Luther Stickle is the African-American, badass guy, and he's the hacker. And he's like, yo, man, we're going to get thinking machine laptops. I'm talking about 686 prototypes with artificial intelligence built in. That doesn't help. I know it's fiction, and it's entertainment. But if we said, yeah, I'm going to use the Ferrari 9000, which doesn't exist, we'd be like, what is that? So it just kind of hurts us a little bit as an industry.
Right.
What are some that you don't like?
Well, just the real quick, I've got the gun to your head and you're just going to, pound on the keyboard and get into this, super secret access that, it just doesn't work that way. There's not like one door. It would be like, going into Fort Knox or whatever and only having to get past one door by kicking it down. It's just, no, there's plenty of things in the way and navigating and seeing around corners, but you have to do it in your mental state and not necessarily the physical state. And then just the representation, like Tron, riding around and
everything's 3D and hacking.
Right. So I mean, yeah, truly trying to get the physical aspects of something that's so electronic is difficult.
Well, I have to say, when I first met you, I was super surprised that you weren't both in black hoodies, like, very, very pale, and, kind of nervous tics. But
yeah, all of those as well. So yes, those
we know people like that.
They do exist.
I'm sure you do. But I also think it's interesting because there is some piece of this. I was talking to a long time ago a forensics person who couldn't believe that there were all these shows, all these, cop shows about, the forensic sciences, everything from, DNA but anyway, they were crime scene tech. And they were like, this is the boringest job ever. Don't you understand? Like we swab and we bottle and we label, and you're hunched over all day, like, and then you go home and you don't think about it. So I do think that's my hope, and perhaps challenge for you guys, is that if the world of Dick Wolf can own like 1 million TV shows about forensics, well, why not cybersecurity?
Yeah, you know what? Forensics is possibly a good place to start, because at least at the end that was something happening, they know how it happened. And, as compared to trying to do it on the fly and demonstrating as is, because at least in our industry, any live demo is guaranteed to go wrong 98% of the time. So,
and one of the reasons I'm here is because of a forensic story called the Cuckoo's Egg, where this astronomer named Cliff Stoll basically found, miscalculation with that you had to pay for all the bandwidth in the CPU back in the day. And it turned out to be East German hackers who were like hacking into TRW and Boeing and the Pentagon. And it was quite a really good book.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and I think there are so many amazing stories of real life hacks, personal, state, on all different levels, that are truly interesting stories, that would certainly captivate. And maybe it's not the exact code being written that did it, but there are real impacts and huge effects. And
kind of like
down.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like in the 1950s where all the doctors were white males, and
Yes.
it took a while to kind of get that stereotype kind of out there. And I kind of feel like, well, all the hackers are white males right now, even though I just named a couple that weren't. But yeah, we're kind of hoping to see a little bit more diversity there. But let me ask you this though: how do we get a Top Gun for cybersecurity made? Like, I don't want to call it Top Cyber or something like that, but something's going to call people who are watching at home and say, I want to go protect the country because Tom Cruise defended aliens hacking into the Pentagon or something along those lines.
Right. Well, I think you actually said it at the end. It's figuring out what is that core action, threat, emotional interface that then you build the rest of it out around. So what is the threat? What is that threat that's so visceral? And then, how do we actually solve this visualization problem of what to do? If you look at the Jack Ryan books and movies as they began, it was interesting because he was an analyst who didn't really do a lot. Like eventually the series grew into all sorts of monster stuff, but it started about sort of knowledge and insertion and place. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting sort of place to start thinking about it. But I really do think it's not saying, hey, it's Fightertown USA. It's saying, hey, what is our Fightertown USA? And is it that you're sort of putting together your kick-ass team where everybody is a specialist, and this is about the takedown of Iranian centrifuges, or whatever thing, that you can then balance enough regular action with this core stuff and be smart about it. But I do think it's challenging.
Yeah, a big thing is because it's hard to visualize what it is. Like, let's say there's an Iranian plot to literally siphon off trillions of dollars from the US economy, and you got some graph representing that, right? I mean, it's just not exciting, right? And even if we kind of talk about, hey, let's shut down the gas and energy grid. Well, we've kind of been there, done that, right? That's not a fiction anymore. It's that's history.
Well, and I think that might be more the point. I think more people are listening and realizing that that digital stuff is physical. And, so they are paying attention and they're asking, well, how, why, and what can I do?
Right. Though I also do think that in terms of, there being that goal of energizing people to move into the industry, I think not just fiction, but I do think the documentary, some of the real life stuff, would be an interesting way to start pursuing some of that.
So if we're going to do a movie about cybersecurity that's realistic, most modern thrillers are going to have some sort of China actor as the villain. Could we even make that kind of movie today in Hollywood or the US?
Because of the China component?
Well, we're not going to, I mean, it might be great. Maybe like, hey, we're hacking the US. We're the good guys.
right. No, I just, yes. Sorry. I just want to make sure I was hearing that correctly. It's very interesting. I think there's two ways to answer the question. One, at the right level, if it's small enough or with the right distribution ideas, you can still make China the bad guy. What's interesting though is I'm actually sort of uniquely centered on this because the Meg movies are the first like full U.S. China co-productions run a full release, and with that, the Chinese are absolute partners and have absolute say and veto power on anything. And what's great about that is it's all very upfront and very clear. As it would be in any other business relationship. If when I'll give you an example, if you work with the Navy, the U.S. Navy, and they have an Office of Film Liaison, and with the right, they choose the projects that are worthwhile and make them look good, or at least have content that they deem worthy. But they also have their rules, and you cannot sink an aircraft carrier if the Navy's helping you out. Okay, that's reasonable. So, not to defend China, but I want to make sure I'm speaking about it in its proper context. Where I think it gets really tricky is not in the partnerships or the small ones. When we're just making our normal movies and China has a certain number of distribution slots, you're hoping to get one. If you don't, they'll give you a limited release, or there's this self-censorship, passive pressure that exists in that area of writing, where you certainly, there's nobody sitting around telling you, but certain things will definitely will get your movie not shown in China. And that is discussed amongst producers, writers, directors, and executives. So they are an economic force, and more so in film. So it matters. And so it's a really interesting sliding scale. I've been very much enjoying the fact that Russia is not much of a film market, and they've been active lately. So you want a bad guy, you can go full Russian anytime. Right now.
Oh, that's great.
I appreciate you sharing. I'm sure that's kind of I don't think there's a website in the Screen Actors Guild about things you shouldn't do to like not get promoted in China or whatnot. But as we talk about cybersecurity, a lot of the success we've had in cybersecurity comes from our interest in science fiction. So what do you watch? What are you looking forward to? Do you read books? Are there shows that you watch? What interests you in science fiction?
Interesting. I was a huge science fiction fan when I was a kid, reading books. It started with Asimov and Heinlein, and then I remember when William Gibson's Neuromancer came out. I was like, good Lord, that blew me away. And then Neil Stephenson with Cryptonomicon. I thought it was just a phenomenal piece of work, and I was so amped for it. Blade Runner is still one of my top 5 movies, and it's interesting. I'm a huge fan of the guy who did the Blade Runner remake. He did that. What's it called?
2048.
Yeah, that one. No, but the Arrival or Arrival.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that movie was incredible, and I'm super excited that he's about to come out with Dune, which I think I'm very much looking forward to. I've heard good things about it. I have not seen it yet, but that's pretty exciting. And I think there's been so much interesting stuff on TV. I really enjoyed Altered Carbon. And there's still so much out there that I haven't gotten to yet. I've been working too much the last couple of years to be as caught up as I'd like to be. So I've actually completely lost the question. I was so excited about listening.
Oh, just
science fiction. You hit several of ours.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Like, what inspires you? What entertains you? Maybe another one is when you're sitting there watching Altered Carbon. And there's like that's like 12 episodes, 14 episodes. I remember we watched that. We really enjoyed it. But there's so much innovation or things that are going on. Do you watch that and then dissect it and go, the thing they did with the landmine that jumped up, I can use that in the Meg, or, do you think of it, things like that? Like,
for sure. I mean, all we do is look at who's doing cool stuff and what can I take or repurpose or evolve? I mean, which is, the way it's always been. It's just sort of faster and in more directions now. But for sure. And what's great is then often being able to grab something out of one movie, and if the movie is just a different genre, then you don't even look like you're stealing well. People just think you're a genius. But no, we for sure, everybody's always watching and loving and taking. It's not true. There's a
it's a flattery, right? It's a flattery.
For sure. But I do have a couple creator friends who are these incredibly focused, live these internal lives where what they put out is a world unto itself. But most of us who are doing the sort of more popcorn film, yeah, I mean, we want to see what's fun, and you know, and you watch it come from pop culture too. I mean, James Bond is always a franchise that is grabbing something. Like parkour becomes big, boom. You know, you have Daniel Craig running around doing a parkour opening of a movie, which is also why they don't always age well. But you know, it's fun, and it's a trade-off.
I'm enjoying watching a lot more of the action movies coming out of other countries, because I don't know about you, but I sit back and I'm like, I would have never thought of that. And just especially Japanese, just the style and some of the things that they come up with. I'm just always like, wow, that's a lot of fun. Don't know where that came from. I'm a little disturbed, but I'm okay.
Totally agree. You know, and it's funny because you're talking about it a little more from a content conception point of view. I also love them for the physical execution. So, for instance, there's an Indonesian movie called The Raid, and then The Raid 2, which pushed the physical fighting to beyond the next level, and some of it was just a safety stuff of what you can do in other countries that you can't do here, like discharging handguns right next to actors' heads. But the Raid series is just a masterclass study in insane action, and yeah, it was flipping great. And you know, the Matrix took it from Hong Kong, and a lot of the swordplay movies coming out of Japan now which is really seamlessly blending the digital effects and digital editing, so it doesn't look like there's effects, but it's insane. Yeah, it's super exciting.
In your profession, so you're inspired, you write, you collaborate with your brother. Are you worried at all that someone's going to come along with like an AI algorithm that kind of synthesizes and instantly writes the scripts? Because we're seeing examples of that. Oh, this AI wrote a recipe, it wrote a song, and it's kind of hard to distinguish sometimes.
I love that you asked that. People have been asking this question for years, and I am absolutely unconcerned. I find it interesting because it's not playing chess, right? It's to make somebody laugh and to carry a character that you care about across a movie and walk out of a theater when lights go up or turn off your TV and feel like you've been taking on a journey that was entirely unexpected and yet entirely satisfying at the same time. And that like you're the only one who watched it the way it was just watched, that there's this intimacy on this completely fabricated thing. No way. That's an incredibly talented, large group of people doing it together. And if it starts with my brother and I, it's figuring out little things to lock into that I don't think will be replaceable.
Having said that, how much technology should they be teaching in film school these days? You got CGI, you got sound effects, you've got basic editing and putting up these ginormous screens behind people like they're doing in the Mandalorian.
Absolutely, which are amazing. It's to look at those sets with the real life 4K projection is one of the craziest things we've seen, and is an innovation that is changing how things are shot and what stuff is going to look like. It's just it's that particular one still blows my mind. And yeah, scanning actors digitally, so we can fix and replace things. It depends. My answer is that it all starts with story, and if you're a writer, no man, you don't need to know anything when you're starting. Later, when you're fixing movies and you're working at higher levels, it's good to know. It's good to have some production background to know what's expensive and what's not, what's hard and what's not. But I don't really think you have to study. I don't think that's the important thing to begin with. I think the important thing to begin with is is what's a story worth telling? What's coming from your heart? Now, sorry, I have ospreys. They practice landing ospreys at the airport where I have my offices, and what I've learned is those are very loud, and I'm not sure why presidents need so many of them, but they always.
In the original screenplay for this, we had a team of crack Marines was in a V-22 Osprey built by.
You're getting up close and personal with your research.
I like this. The Gula reach is long. very impressive. Putting the adventure in tech adventures.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. Technology and effects and physical production. What's great is if you are getting into production and that is taught, you of course can learn it. And if that's where you start heading in a career, and there's worlds that are amazing careers in that. But no, if you're sitting there and you're in college and you want to make it as a writer, start writing. If you're a director, think about your vision, and then there will be people who can help you figure out how to execute that. But having the vision is the first thing that needs to be done, and nothing else will matter unless you have that effectively.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's getting past that critique, having somebody review your work, and whether they're improving it or not, they're certainly commenting and giving their opinion on it. That's really hard. I mean, is there any advice that you could give, just even like how best to get through the first edits of critique?
Sure. The first thing I would say is be thoughtful about who you're giving it to critique, right? Make sure there's somebody who is thoughtful about film, who watches movies, who has advice worth offering. I mean, and it sounds maybe like a basic idea, but the number of times people are giving their screenplays to people who aren't writers or don't really watch movies that much, and then taking advice is silly to me. Obviously you only have the people you have in your world, and it's important to get other perspectives, but listen thoughtfully. Another thing that I'd say is, when hearing advice, if you just listen to people's problems, have that open mind of saying, okay, they're saying the problems here, they're reacting to something here or this moment. Now, maybe that's where the problem is, or maybe it's in a different area where it was my setup that created that problem. So try to think holistically about it. I would say always go back to your original whole vision of what it is you're working on, so you don't get pulled in a million different directions. It's easy to start chasing things, which gets back to, by the way, outlines. And I think it's worth getting critique on your outline, not your movie. One of the reasons we do that is because when, as I said before, when we pass them to producers and pass them to executives, we're trading ideas and restructuring stuff. It's a whole lot easier to do that in a 12, 15-page document than a 110-page script. You move something in a script, good Lord, the ripples that go downstream are, days and days and days of work, as opposed to on that shorter document, you can just accommodate those changes much more efficiently.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. And it's funny, when I was listening to you, I'm like, yeah, that's great advice for any entrepreneur, anybody who is, trying to take a bigger concept and provide it to somebody else. It's just, take it at a step that you can actually be productive and not just chase butterflies, so to speak.
Right. And I think I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, another basic thing that I'm surprised by often is also the willingness to take advice. Don't give me your screenplay and ask me to read it if you don't want to hear what I have to say. So if you want, or with the balance, if you want me to just tell you you're a genius, tell me that up front, because I'm going to have opinions. And that goes with everybody, you give it to. If you really want opinions, remember that when they're talking to you. You ask for it.
That's awesome. Well, Jon, we just want to thank you for coming on Gula Tech Cyber Fiction. Wish you the best of luck with, my gosh, Mighty Mouse, Meg 2, Naruto, Transformers, and Will Smith. You know,
Fast and loose.
Fast and Loose. You know, Mr. July. They call him Mr. July, right? Something like that. If he needs help changing his password or getting some two-factor setting up, give us a call. But yeah, thank you. So this is Ron and Cyndi Gula signing out for the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.